Hello and welcome to Studio X's Intro to VR with Unity workshop. This is a continuation on the previous Unity workshop that is also recorded and on YouTube. So, let's get started with VR in Unity. First off, I'm just going to let you know that we're going to be using the XR Interaction Toolkit for the purposes of this workshop. This is Unity's built-in interaction toolkit for all things VR, AR, and mixed reality. So this toolkit package has all of these nice features completely built in. So you don't need to worry about implementing any of them yourself. They're all here for you to use. So first, just for those who aren't sure how to use VR, and specifically the controllers, I'm going to go over the Quest controllers. However, you can use this workshop with other VR devices that will have slightly different controller designs, so this may not apply to you if that's the case. So the grip button right here, oh, you can't see my mouse, or maybe you can. Yes, you can. So the grip button is right here on both controllers, and it is pressed with your middle finger, and it is used generally for grabbing items. Grabbing objects in your world. And right above it is the trigger button. And this is pressed with your pointer finger or your, it's technically called index finger. And this is generally for interacting with objects or user interfaces. So, for example, the main control scheme of the Meta Quest is point and click, and you click with the trigger button to activate UI buttons and other things. The face buttons are labeled A, B, X, and Y. And these buttons have different uses across different VR applications. So in this specific experience demo project that we're going to be using today, they don't have any uses at all. So you're not going to have to worry about them today. But in other experiences, they may be used for various things. The menu button is located on the left controller, and it's a bit sunken. It's like sunk into the controller, so it's not like the face buttons, where they're very much like popped out of the controller and you press them down. They're kind of hard to feel, so you kind of just need to know that they're there. The menu button and the Oculus button. So the menu button will bring up menus. Typically in game, it'll bring up menus. However, the Oculus button is now called the Meta button. And when you hold this button down, it will recenter your view. And so this is really useful for if you're in VR and you're not exactly sure where you are, or you're kind of like lost, or like the menu isn't like right in front of you and it's somewhere else. If you hold the Meta button down, formerly the Oculus button, it should recenter your view, and hopefully you should have a better grasp of what's going on. The Oculus button, or I should say the Meta button, is also very useful for the main menu. So So you press this button to leave an experience and try out something else. And you use this to, to open up the main menu. Rather than the menu button, which is for in-game menus or in-software menus, the Oculus button will actually take you out of that software. And the only other thing left to talk about in terms of controllers is locomotion, or just moving. And so there's generally two ways to move in VR, continuous movement and teleportation. And I've added these emojis here just to kind of demonstrate which of these two options might induce nausea or motion sickness. Continuous movement is performed with the left thumbstick, and this is just like movement you would have in any other 3D game. It just moves you, up, down, left, right in any direction you want. And it is, for a lot of people, quite motion sickness inducing. And this is because there's a disconnect between what you're seeing with your eyes and what you're feeling with your body. So what you're seeing with your eyes is that you're, moving around, but your body doesn't experience that at all. And so there's a disconnect there that can be motion sickness inducing. Teleportation, on the other hand, lets you point to a specific spot, and you'll just immediately teleport there. This is a bit more friendly to those who are easier to be motion sick. Because it just immediately transports you. Now, this is not to say that continuous movement is bad, necessarily. And continuous movement might be the best option for you depending on what sort of experience you're trying to make. This is just kind of giving some context. And in terms of turning the camera, that is what you use the right thumbstick for. And there's generally two ways to do this. It's with smooth turn, or smooth/continuous turn, and snap turn. So smooth turn, just like continuous moving, is it will gradually shift your view based on a certain speed from one spot to another. And this is, for me at least, like really just not, it's really, really nausea inducing. And I always prefer snap turn when I can get it. Snap turn will immediately shift your view based off of a certain angle. And so this decreases the sort of disconnect I was talking about earlier, where you're not actually moving your head, but it'll just snap it for you. Whereas with smooth turn, it's like you're moving your head, but in real life, your head is not moving. So there's just this really bad disconnect there, at least for me. So I'm going to go ahead and hop into VR and do a demo of the project that we're going to be working with today. I'm going to be doing this with a MetaQuest 3 headset, and this workshop is specifically designed to work with the MetaQuest series of headsets. However, this project is OpenXR compatible, so this means that any headset that you can use with OpenXR, you should be able to use with this project. So just know that if you don't have a MetaQuest series headset, you can use a different headset. And so to get started, first plug your headset into your computer or use AirLink with MetaQuest Link, and make sure that your device is correctly recognized by your computer. You see that I have my MetaQuest 3 here. And so I am going to go ahead and hop into my headset and just make sure everything's all right. All right, I had to I don't see any of my menus, which is a bit concerning, but I'm going to go ahead and jump into the project. So in the last workshop, we were working in scene 1, the quad, but today we're going to be working in scene 2. So if you're not already in scene 2, you can go to the scenes folder and double click scene 2. And I'm going to enter play mode, and it should automatically launch me in with VR. Yep, here I am. And I'm going to just maximize this so you all can see. Perfect. So, here we are in the room, and just like I was mentioning, I can move with the left stick, just like this. And I'm just realizing now that it might be a little hard to see. So I'm going to try. That's probably better. So here I am. I can move around all directions with my left stick. And with my right stick, I can snap turn, just like that. And here you'll see that there's actually a menu for editing some of these options. And so, for example, if you wanted to enable smooth turn, you can just point and click with the trigger like I was talking about earlier, and select smooth turn, and that looks like this, which, I really dislike that. And so I'm going to put snap turn back on. And you can also disable continuous movement, so now I can't move with my left stick anymore. You can even disable teleportation, but I'm going to keep both of those enabled. And a very neat thing with recent XR Interaction Toolkit updates is you can actually use, you see there's this little dot on my finger, and you can actually use this as a touch interactor with UI. So just like you would tap your like your phone with a touch screen, you can now tap just like that, tap all these, and there you have it. I haven't shown teleportation yet, so that is just with the right stick. If you press it up and hold it, then you can find somewhere valid to teleport to. So like I could teleport over here, and then I can teleport over there, teleport over here, and just hop around the room just like that. All right, now I'm going to show some of the interactables that we have in this project. So, for example, now we're going to use the grip button to grab this flashlight. So now I've grabbed the flashlight, and if I click the trigger, we'll see that the flashlight actually turns on and off whenever I click it. So this is an example of an interactable or an activatable, I guess a grabbable that can be activated. Another example of this is the phone. And if I hold it and I click the trigger, it will start playing a video. And if I click it again, it'll play another video. And if I click it again, it'll turn off. There's also some other fun things in this room. Like you can pour this can of soda for pretty much ever, because it will not ever run out. Similarly, you can water the plants if you so choose. You can even turn the music on and off and switch songs, which you probably can't hear, but you can try it out for yourself. I just turn the music off. And you just notice that I grabbed the radio from afar, from a distance. And so this is a really useful feature of the XR Interaction Toolkit. You can grab objects from a distance, and then you can actually even turn them by pressing left and right on the right stick, or whichever stick you use to grab the object. And I'm just doing this with the grab button. Nothing else special about it. And then you can move it forward and back using stick up and stick down. And you can bring it right to your hand. Similar to the phone, the remote will turn on the TV and then pause it. And over here we have something fun. We have these hats. And you can actually put these hats on top of your head. And you see that my head is now tracked with the hat. And you can then put them on the hanger. And you can do the same for the witch hat. Yeah, and then all that's left is pretty much the tennis racket and ball. And the tennis ball has a physics material on it, which lets it bounce. And I kind of just clipped it out of the wall there, which is, just how it... Oh, never mind. It's right there. Perfect. Alright, and I think that's everything to show in the demo. So we'll go ahead and get out of VR. If you haven't already, go ahead and just test out playing around in this room. Test out all the movement options and turning options and things like that. And if you're having trouble actually connecting to MetaQuest Link, you can follow these steps to enter Link once your headset is connected to your computer through a cable. All right, so now that we know how this project works in VR, we will now go ahead and learn how to develop for it. So we're going to edit the snap and smooth turn values. So you might find that the current values are too small. You're not snapping enough, or you're not moving enough with the smooth turn. And in this specific project, you can actually go ahead and let down the hierarchy for the XR game object and go into the XR origin game object. And there is a component called XR Controls Manager. And you can change the snap turn amount. The defaults will be 45 and 60, I believe. You can change them to whatever you like. Maybe not 1,000, but 100 should be good. And then you can go ahead into VR and test out the values and see if it worked. However, here's a disclaimer about this particular script, is that this script is not part of the XR Interaction Toolkit. This is a script that I wrote that is a part of our base project at Studio X. And you can actually find the real values by letting down the hierarchy, going into locomotion, and then turn. And you'll find the turn amount and turn speed here. And you can edit these values directly. And similarly, there's also the move game object. So you can change how fast you move as well. So that might be useful for you to know as well. So now we are going to create some teleportation areas. And so this is going to be useful for if you want your VR experience to be compatible with teleportation. There's already a few teleportation areas in this scene. All the rugs here are teleportation areas, besides this brown one. So we're going to make our own, and we're going to do it by following these instructions. We're going to create a plane. We're going to add a teleportation area component to it. We're going to set its interaction layer mask to teleport only, and then we're going to test it out. So we're going to click the plus in the hierarchy, go to 3D object, and then plane. And you'll see that it's a bit too big, so we're going to remember back to last workshop that we can scale it down by clicking the scale button in this little widget. And we can click and hold the gray box to uniformly scale on all three axes. And then we can use the position tool, which is right here, to move it down to where we want. All right. And you'll see that it already has a mesh collider given to it. So no need to mess with any colliders. But we're going to need to add a component to it to make it actually teleportable. And this is going to be the teleportation area. And there's a lot of stuff here, and actually there's only one thing we need to edit in this component, and that's the interaction layer mask, which is right here. And this is for Unity to know when certain things want to interact with each other and what they don't want to interact with. So for example, we want our teleport cursor to interact with only teleport areas. And so we're going to check teleport. But after we do that, you'll see that the interaction layer mask actually says mixed. And we don't want that because now it's on default and teleport. So we're just going to uncheck default, and now we'll see that it only says teleport. So now I'm going to go ahead and get into Unity, or into play mode, into my headset. And I'm going to try teleporting to this area. And it works perfectly. And there I go. Perfect. Exactly what we wanted. So, you'll notice that we only changed one thing here in the teleportation area component. And there are some things listed as none. And for interaction manager, we could manually assign this as our XR interaction manager, and teleportation provider could be manually assigned as our teleportation provider. However, it will automatically find those components even if you don't assign them. So you don't need to assign them. However, if you'd like to, you can. All right. So the next thing I want to go over is interactors and interactables. So interactors are objects in the scene that can select or move another object in the scene. And so an obvious example of this are your hands. And interactables are objects in a scene that the user can interact with. They can grab it, press it, throw it. And so an example of these is like the grabbable objects in the scene, like the flashlight and the tennis racket. And so we're now going to make our own grabbable object. So to do this, we're going to make a cylinder and give it the XR grab interactable component. And we're also going to try out a really cool feature called use dynamic attach. And I will explain that in just a moment. So just like with the plane, we're going to click plus in the hierarchy, and we're going to make a new 3D object, which is a cylinder. And we're going to scale it down once again. And I'm going to make it a lot skinnier and then make it longer like that. There we go. So it's kind of like a baseball bat or something like that. Ish. You know, with some imagination. All right, and so it already has a capsule collider, but for objects that are grabbable, we're going to need them to have physics. And just the collider isn't going to cut it. We're going to need a rigid body. So just like last time, we're using a rigid body to give this component physics. And we currently don't have a component that lets us grab it, so we're going to need to add the XR grab interactable component. And just like before, we don't need to specify the interaction manager or anything like that. We're only going to look at this use dynamic attach variable here. So use dynamic attach lets us grab the object at any point. So if we were to try to grab it now, it would attach right at this point here where the movement gizmo is, or the position gizmo, excuse me. It would grab right at that point. But what enabling use dynamic attach lets us do is grab the object at any point. And so I'll show you what I mean as I get into VR here. So when I go to grab the object, if I grab it at the top, I grab it at the top. If I grab it at the bottom, I grab it at the bottom. Middle, anywhere I grab it, it will be grabbed at that point thanks to the use dynamic attach. As opposed to, for example, if I were to disable use dynamic attach and I tried to grab it, it would fix right to that point that I said it would. So if I try to grab it here, it will fix itself to the middle of it. And so in some cases, this might not be the behavior you want. you might want to be able to grab it at any point. However, what about this tennis racket? If I try to grab it here at the netting, you'll see that it snaps it to the handle. But so how can we do that? There's certain objects that we might want to be only grab it, to only be able to grab it at a certain point. For example, this flashlight, it will also fix to a point. And so that you're not flashing, the light at yourself, that you're flashing it in front of you. And so this is what we're going to go over next. This is something called an attach transform. And this is a very useful feature that lets you specify a point that you want to attach your object to when you grab it. So we're going to add an attach transform to our cylinder. And this is what we're going to do is we're going to make a new game object and set it as the point that we want to grab it at. So once again, actually it's going to be slightly different. We're going to, instead of clicking the plus button, we're going to right click, we're going to select the cylinder and then right click it and create a new 3D object that way. And we're going to make a cube. And we're going to see that now our cube exists here. And it's going to automatically have a box collider. We're going to disable that for now. And I'm also going to scale it down a little bit. And I'm going to position it where I want to grab the cylinder at. So I'm going to want to grab it down at the base here. Maybe a little bit higher. So perfect. So now we have our point where we're going to grab the object, but now we need to specify it. So we're going to need to go back into the cylinder's inspector window and disable use dynamic attach because we only want to be able to attach it at one point. And we'll see that there is this attach transform variable here. All we need to do is drag the cube into that variable. And now Unity knows that I want to attach at the point where the cube is. All right, so let's test it out. So when I go to grab it, if I try to grab it at the top, it'll snap to that point I specified. No matter where I grab it, it'll snap right to that cube, which is exactly what I wanted it to do. Perfect. However, you'll probably be wondering, well, now we just have this random cube there. How do we get rid of that cube? I don't want my player to see that cube. And that's a great question. Yes, actually seeing this cube is only for you, the developer, to be able to place the point that you want to attach it at clearly. Because otherwise, you would just be moving a 3D point in space, and that can get really annoying and hard to honestly see what you're doing, because from certain perspectives, it might look like it's somewhere else, and you need to continuously rotate around it to make sure it's where you want it to be. And so that's exactly what I just did. To do that, we can just disable the mesh renderer component on the cube, and it'll be invisible. Our players will never see it. So you can just do that. If you want to, you can even just remove, once you've had it set, you can just remove all of the mesh components. You can also remove that box collider. But if you want to keep toying around with different attach points, you can keep these and just disable them. And that's about it for the workshop. What's left is we can try a little side quest to make a custom interactable. And what this means is that we're going to import a free model from the Unity Asset Store and try to make it grabbable. And remember back from last time, we can go to Window and then Asset Store in Unity, and it'll automatically bring us to the Asset Store. And I'm going to look in Props in the 3D section. And I'm going to scroll down and make sure that I'm only looking at free assets. I'm going to try out this tool set that's right here. It looks pretty small, but definitely something that would be grabbable in VR. So I'm going to click Add to my assets, and remember to always be aware of the license agreement of the assets you're using. And then it's going to say Added to my assets, and then open in Unity. And it'll open up the Unity package manager here, and I can then download the tool set and then import it into my project. And I don't need the example showcase scene, so I'm just not going to include that in my import. And everything else I'm going to need, so I'm going to import it. And now in Unity, in my assets, I should see a new folder, which is usually either the name of the creator or the name of the pack of the asset. And in this case is the name of the creator. And I'm going to go to prefabs, and I'm going to drag one of these into my project. And unfortunately, it is completely pink, just like last time. And I'm also gonna, make it a little smaller. So if your imported asset is pink, here's my first recommendation, is to go to any imported materials and select each one by holding Control or Shift. Shift will select all of them from like a certain range, and Control will individually select them. And then go to Edit, Rendering, Materials, and then convert selected built-in materials to URP. And in my case, that worked. But in your case, if it didn't work, the next thing to try is in Window, Rendering, Render Pipeline Converter, which should bring up this window, and do a material upgrade and click Convert Assets. If that still doesn't work, then my suggestion is to try to recreate the materials or use other materials that already exist for that. So for example, if I really needed to find my own materials for this pickaxe, I can go here next to the search bar. There's this little shapes icon, and I can just select materials, and this will show me every material currently in my project. And so maybe there's already a metal-like material in my project that I could use for the metal part, or a wood-like material for the wood part. There's this bark, and so you can just drag and drop it in there, and that looks, pretty reasonable. And then for metal, I could use, what is this? Could use some sort of grayish material. Not finding anything super promising, but you could also easily make one yourself. That would be suitable for this kind of thing. And I just found something else that could work for the wood part. And then, yeah, there we go. And I didn't need to use any materials for that that were imported from the project. And you can even make this look better if you edit the material, make it more metallic. You can change all of these sorts of values and make one that is suitable for you. In my case, I was able to successfully import those materials, so I'll just use them for now. Now let's make this pickaxe grabbable. So we're going to want to do exactly what we've been doing. This has a mesh collider, which can sometimes not play nice with rigid bodies. So for example, if I was to try to play the project with this mesh collider and the rigid body, we will most likely observe that the pickaxe has fallen through the table. Yep, and there it goes. And you can try to catch up with it, but it's just going to keep falling. If that's the case, then you'll see that Unity will give you an error. Just for now, you can, give it a box collider, and you can add multiple colliders as well to your project, to your object. And so this one's a little, it's not entirely great. So what I might do is move this one so that it's kind of, this part of the pickaxe. Maybe I'll do this. And then I can add another box collider. And I can make this one the top portion. And that should work pretty well. And yeah, exactly, just like that. Except we're missing our XRGrab interactable component, which we're going to need if we want it to be grabbable. And we're going to want to use an attached transform for this, so let's go ahead and make that. 3D object, cube, scale it down, scale it way down. And I'm going to place it like right there looks about good. And so I'm going to go ahead into the cube, disable the box collider, disable the mesh renderer, go into that pickaxe and set the cube as the attached transform. And then I'm going to head into VR and test it out. All right, and if I try to grab it from the top, it'll go immediately there. And the only unfortunate thing about this pickaxe right now, in terms of its grabbability, I'm going to put the attached transform a little bit down, but also I'm kind of holding it weird. Like this is the default pose when you would kind of think that this would be the default pose rather than this. And so we can actually change that. And we can do it in just the exact same way that we've been, doing it with the attached transform. It's all based on the attached transform. So all we need to do is just, we see that this blue arrow is pointing that way, and we're probably going to want it to point that way if we just rotate it. And hopefully this way, it will more naturally attach to my hand. So let's test that theory out. Yep, and that's a little bit better. I would personally rotate it a little bit more this way, but yeah. And I also forgot to turn off the mesh renderer, but that's okay. Oh. And there you go. That's how you make a custom interactable in the XR Interaction Toolkit in Unity. Thanks so much. Hope you learned something new. Here's some tips heading out of this workshop. Test out your VR project as often as you can. If you make too many changes without testing, you might discover later that a lot of stuff is broken. And if you had just tested it before, you would have been able to fix that before it got too out of hand. So definitely recommend that. If you're in one of the classes that we offer office hours for, you can ask us about those office hours. You can sign up for those to get help with your VR project. So yeah, there you have it. Good luck making your own VR project.